Hello! This is a part 3 of our long-running series on the Spanish subjunctive. In the next couple of videos, we're gonna go beyond the essential weirdo triggers, covering the advanced situations like this. Te llamo cuando tengo tiempo and te llamaré cuando tenga tiempo. Why does one sentence use normal indicative tengo and the other uses subjunctive tenga? Looks scary, eh? Don't be scared. We'll figure it out. Together. Come on, don't leave me hanging. Much better. But first, before we jump into the video, part 1 and 2 videos cover the 85% of the essential Spanish subjunctive usage and can be found right here and in the video description. If you haven't seen them yet, or you have but you still don't completely understand how basic subjunctive structure and weirdo triggers work, I want you to stop watching this video and go and watch them first. I don't want you to waste your time and energy by going over advanced 15% of subjunctive stuff without making sure you are good with basics first. In the 2 previous videos, we were following the idea of a 2-subject structure, which consisted of the following: 2 subjects, 2 verbs, and a conjunction que between them to separate the main and the subordinate clauses. So a typical subjunctive sentence would look like this: Yo espero que Marcos coma más. The most important part here is that the subject number 1 has to express some uncertainty towards subject number 2's actions, such as a wish or emotion. The verb that expresses this uncertainty is called a trigger, and in the video number 2 we were talking about the essential 85% of triggers that are hiding behind the acronym called WEIRDO. That is, wishes and desires, emotions, impersonal expressions, recommendations and requests, doubt and denial, and ojalá. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, stop watching this video, Jesus. Now, what happens if we don't have a 2-subject structure and all the conditions we've just described? Do we just forget and stop worrying about subjunctive? I fucking wish. What happens if instead of expressing uncertainty, like wishes and feelings, towards other people's actions, we express uncertainty about when something happens, if it happens, and whether something even exists? Don't worry just yet. The main idea remains the same. It's still all about showing uncertainty. We're just gonna expand on what uncertainty means. And I don't want to say forget everything we've learned, like a 2-subject structure and the weirdo triggers. But please just try not to fixate on them too much, because everything we will be discussing today and in the future videos will work differently from the work we have done so far. We will begin by identifying the 3 main groups of advanced uncertainty. Number 1, time uncertainty. When will something happen? I don't know yet. Number 2, conditional uncertainty. Will this condition be met? I don't know yet. Number 3, existence uncertainty. Do we even exist? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. I mean, from a theological point of view, we could all be just some thoughts in God's mind, or maybe we are a part of some bigger reality we don't understand. Like that one time when I decided to try to be a YouTuber. Embarrassing. What was I thinking? I certainly was not thinking. Well, anyway, I'm glad it was just a dream. Or was it? For all that, we also use subjunctive in Spanish. All these advanced types of uncertainty trigger subjunctive because we are dealing with the unknown. The difference is that we're not expressing emotions about it like we did with weirdo triggers. Here we're just acknowledging the uncertainty. Now let's define the triggers that make us use subjunctive in these advanced scenarios. Based on the types of uncertainty we've just discussed, we can derive 6 advanced trigger categories: time-based triggers, conditional triggers, purpose triggers, probability triggers, existence triggers, and extreme triggers. It might seem like a lot, because it is. But do not worry, each category will have its own dedicated video, so today we'll be talking only about time-based triggers. This stuff is hard, so we have to go slowly, and I'll do my best to make sure everything makes sense. Please don't forget about the additional materials in the video description. We've got a PDF and quiz and the video chapters, ooh la la, everything at your disposal. Thank you for joining, and let's finally begin. Chapter 0. Introduction to time-based triggers. Time-based triggers talk about when something happens or will happen. This is called an event. To understand it better, allow me to introduce you to the 3 types of events that we will be using in this video. Number 1. Habitual events, or just habits. This is something we've internalized. This is something we know, understand, and perceive as a fact. Something we do on a regular basis, like a routine. Here we use normal present indicative mood. Number 2. Past events. Since they happened in the past, we already know everything about them. There's no uncertainty here either. Therefore, we use a normal past indicative mood here as well. Lastly, number 3. Future events. Here's where it gets interesting, because when we talk about the future events, we don't always know if or when something will happen. This introduces uncertainty in what we are saying, which will require us to use subjunctive as God intended. From this little rant of mine, we can derive a master rule for this video. When we have a habitual or past event, which means we know it happens or happened, we use indicative. However, when we talk about the future event, which means we don't always know if and when something will happen, that will require us to use subjunctive. The specific time-based triggers we will be talking about today are cuando, hasta que, and cuanto tan pronto como, mientras, después de que, antes de que. Just a quick reminder, most triggers we'll be dealing with today will require neither two subjects nor conjunction que. Like I said before, I still want you to keep them in mind, because sometimes these concepts will pop up again, but don't let them distract you. I would say just try to keep an open mind. Each trigger will have its own dedicated chapter for quick and easy navigation. Let's proceed. Chapter 1. Cuando. We begin with cuando. Let us eliminate the confusion first. In Spanish we have two types of cuando, as you may know. First we have cuando with an accent, which serves as an interrogative adverb used to ask questions. Cuando llegas. And then we have cuando without an accent, which serves as a conjunction that we use to connect clauses and describe when something happens. Cuando hace calor nos gusta desayunar en el jardín. In both cases, cuando can be translated as when, but when it's used as a conjunction, it can also be translated as whenever and as. When it comes to subjunctive, we're only gonna need the second type of cuando, because today it's all about connecting clauses and describing when or whenever something might happen or not. Let's begin with the first type of event, habits. Look at this sentence. Siempre como cuando tengo hambre. This is a habit. There's no uncertainty here. There's nothing to trigger here for a conjunction cuando. Thus, we have to use a normal present indicative conjugation for the verb tener, to have, which is tengo. Now let's see how the same sentence would look like in a past event. Ayer comí cuando tuve hambre. Same idea here, right? I was hungry yesterday, so I ate. We use a normal indicative conjugation for the verb tener, just in the past form. Again, there's nothing for cuando to trigger, so we have tuve. Now for the best part, a future event. Would you look at that? Comeré cuando tenga hambre. What is tenga? It's a present subjunctive form of the verb tener. And why do we need it here? Because we're describing doing something whenever it happens in the future. We're certain that we will eat, but we are not certain about when that will happen. This uncertainty about when something might or might not happen triggers subjunctive. And just to be clear for all of you enthusiasts there, this does not mean that every time we talk about future events we have to use subjunctive. For example, when I say comeré mañana a las 10, I don't express any uncertainty. I know exactly what will happen tomorrow at 10. The only reason we triggered subjunctive in the previous sentence was because it had cuando in there, which conveyed uncertainty. That's why it's important to know how triggers work. Let's do more examples with cuando. Cuando hay tráfico, tomo el metro. Please know that a trigger can also be located in the beginning of the sentence. If we think about it, it shouldn't really matter. Our triggers exist to separate main and subordinate or relative clauses. Our main clause is our main action, and in this sentence it is us taking the subway. And when do we do it? Whenever there's traffic. The placement of main and subordinate clauses doesn't change anything. What's important and challenging in this video is understanding whether we're talking about a habitual or future events, because sometimes the ways our languages are structured can make us think we're talking about the future when in reality we're just describing a routine. I usually take subway when there's traffic simply describes our actions under certain conditions that happen on a daily basis. We're not talking about a specific event in the future. We don't have any uncertainty here, therefore there's no need for subjunctive. Now let's do another one for the past event. Marcus me llamó cuando él supo la noticia. Again, just a fact about a completed event in the past. And finally, the future event. Llámame cuando llegues a casa. See the difference? We're asking someone to give us a call whenever he or she arrives home. When exactly will that happen? We don't know, not from this sentence at least. All we know is that it should happen sometime in the future. That's why we have to conjugate the verb llegar, to arrive, into the present subjunctive form. So instead of llegas, we have llegues. There's one thing I would like to note about the future events. Using future tense is not the only way to describe something that happens in the future. In a current sentence, we are using a command, meaning we're asking someone to do something. At the same time, we could phrase a similar sentence like this: Voy a llamarte cuando yo llegue a casa. In this case, we're technically using present tense to describe a future event. In this case, it's the same as saying te llamaré cuando yo llegue a casa. You see, it's the same thing. Whether we will do something or we are going to do something, we are still describing a future event, which will trigger subjunctive when used with triggers such as cuando. Let's do a little test to check our knowledge. Don't worry, we'll start simple. Here is a sentence for you. Marcos me llamará cuando el tiempo. All you need to do is to conjugate the verb tener correctly, or at least try to decide whether you should use indicative or subjunctive conjugation here. Please feel free to pause the video if you need some time. 3, 2, 1, boom. So what do we have here? Think about what type of event we're dealing with. Marcus will call me. That's a future tense. We don't know when exactly that's gonna happen. That uncertainty is what cuando is trying to trigger here. So instead of normal tiene, we need the present subjunctive form of the verb tener, which gives us Marcus me llamará cuando él tenga tiempo. I know you did a good job. Let's proceed. Chapter 2. Hasta que. Now let's move to the next trigger. Hasta que means until or till, just like normal hasta, without que. This phrase works similarly to cuando. Let's look at each type of event. First, a habitual event. Marta siempre estudia hasta que se hace tarde. Everything is normal here, we're describing a routine, that's why hasta que does not trigger subjunctive for the verb hacer. Now let's see a past event. Ayer esperé hasta que terminaste. Again, we're talking about a past event that was completed. No uncertainty, no subjunctive. Now look at this. Esperaré hasta que termines. I will wait until some uncertain moment in the future happens and you will be done with whatever you need to do. We don't know how long it will take. This uncertainty triggers subjunctive, so that's why we have termines and not terminas. No empezamos hasta que estás listo, and no empezaremos hasta que estés listo. See the difference? The first sentence is using present tense because we are describing a routine, something that just normally happens. However, as soon as we are talking about the same thing but in the future, hasta que triggers the uncertainty and we have to use subjunctive conjugation for the verb estar. Test number 2. Which sentence is correct? Esperaré hasta que Marcos llega or esperaré hasta que Marcos llegue? 3, 2, 1. Time's up. Are we describing a routine or a future event? We are talking about a future event, so hasta que does its thing and triggers subjunctive. We are waiting until some certain moment in the future when Marcus finally decides to show up. Nobody knows when it's gonna happen. That uncertainty triggers subjunctive, and that's why it has to be llegue and not llega. I hope it makes sense. Let's proceed to the next trigger. Chapter 3. En cuanto, tan pronto como. Both en cuanto and tan pronto como mean as soon as in English, so we will be using them interchangeably. The logic is the same though. Let's look at the habitual event first. Tan pronto como suena el despertador, me levanto. Or you could say, Marcos siempre come en cuanto llega a casa. In both examples, we're describing habitual events which always get completed without any uncertainty. No subjunctive here. Now let's see what we got for the past event. En cuanto llegó John, me llamó. Or maybe this. Salí tan pronto como terminé mi trabajo. Again, we're talking about the completed event in the past, so no subjunctive needed. Finally, the future event. Lo haré en cuanto pueda. See, again, we don't know when exactly we're gonna do what we need to do. We'll do it as soon as we can. Might be 5 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour? I don't know, but what I do know is that we need to express this uncertainty by conjugating the verb poder into the present subjunctive form, which is pueda, not puedo. Here's another example. Nos vamos tan pronto como salga el sol. When are we gonna leave? I don't know, whenever the sun comes up. Salga is the present subjunctive form of the verb salir, in case you didn't know. Just a reminder, please don't worry too much about conjugations, we're gonna cover them in future videos. Just focus on the structure for now. New test. Fill in the blank, por favore. Te mando el documento en cuanto lo... 3, 2, 1. So what do we have? I'm going to send you the document as soon as I finish it. That's a future event, which means we don't know exactly when that's gonna happen. En cuanto sees that uncertainty and does what it does best, trigger subjunctive. So we get te mando el documento en cuanto lo termine. Not too bad, was it? Let's continue. Chapter 4. Mientras. Our next trigger is mientras. Here's where we need to be careful. Mientras is a conjunction that most people translate as while, but apparently it can also be translated as long as and whereas. Each translation has different use cases and only some of them trigger subjunctive. Let's cover each translation one by one. Translation number 1. While. When mientras is translated as while, usually we express simultaneous events, that is, two things happening at the same time. In this case, we follow the same exact logic for habitual, past and future events as before, meaning that only future event will trigger subjunctive. Let's start with the habit. Escucho música mientras trabajo. Now something in the past. Leía mientras esperaba el autobús. Finally, a future event. Te ayudaré mientras estés aquí. I hope you can see that only the future event got triggered to subjunctive as before. Please also know that in all three sentences we express two actions that happen at the same time. While this condition is met, we follow the normal logic for habitual, past and future events when it comes to subjunctive. Translation number 2. As long as. When we use the phrase as long as, we specify a condition under which something may or may not happen. What it does is it introduces uncertainty into what we are saying, because there's no guarantee that the action will be completed. Let's just see some examples. Puedes quedarte mientras no hagas ruido. You see, you can stay as long as you don't make noise. If you do make noise, the condition is not gonna be met, therefore there's no guarantee you can stay here. It all depends on you. When mientras is translated as long as, it will always trigger subjunctive. That's why we have hagas instead of haces for the verb hacer, to do. Some articles say that there is 1% chance that you may encounter an exception where subjunctive will not be triggered here, but I couldn't find any examples online. I wouldn't worry about it if I were you. The very definition of as long as just screams uncertainty, and that's all we need really. Here's another example. Mientras haya respeto, todo irá bien. What's interesting is that with as long as, we're not worried about habitual, past or future events. In this case, there is respect or there's no respect. We don't know which one it is, that's why it triggers uncertainty, and so we have haya instead of I. Mientras me pagues, sigo trabajando. Are you gonna pay me or not? I don't know right now, and that's why this condition triggers subjunctive, and we have pagues instead of pagas. Translation number 3. Whereas. This one is easy but important to note for contrast. When mientras is used with que, it means whereas. We use whereas to show contrast between two people or two facts, for example. In this case, we're just describing two things or people without really triggering anything. That's why it will use normal indicative mood. For example, a mí me gusta el café mientras que a ella le gusta el té. Marcos trabaja mucho mientras que su hermano no hace nada. In both examples, all we do is show contrast between two facts or preferences. There's no uncertainty here, therefore no subjunctive needed. You can also translate mientras que as while in this case, but just don't get confused. Always keep in mind about what it represents. Here we're not talking about simultaneous actions. You can translate it both as while or whereas, just don't trigger subjunctive, because there's nothing to trigger in this case. Hey, new test. This one is a little trickier. I'm gonna give you two sentences, both of which use mientras. Your job is to tell me which one needs subjunctive and which one doesn't. Mientras Marcos, yo como. And puedes usar mi coche mientras no lo... I'm not giving you any translations yet because that would make things easy. Pause the video and take your time. 3, 2, 1... Alright, let's start with the first sentence. Here we have two things happening at the same time. Marcos works, I eat, therefore mientras here means while. Since we're describing a normal and habitual event that happens at the same time, there's no need for subjunctive. So the verb trabajar stays exactly as it is in a normal indicative form. That is, mientras Marcos trabaja, yo como. In the sentence number 2, though, we're specifying a condition under which the person can use our car. There's no guarantee that you won't crash it, which brings uncertainty into what we are saying. So that's why it's safe to say that we can translate mientras as long as in this case, which makes it easy for us to just trigger subjunctive without even thinking. What we have is puedes usar mi coche mientras no lo dañes. Dañes, not dañas. Remember, when we say while, we follow the normal habitual past future logic. However, as long as always triggers subjunctive without exceptions. Chapter 5. Después de que. As you probably know, después means after, but it's the phrase después de que what triggers subjunctive. For this trigger, we have to bring back three concepts we learned in all our subjunctive videos, including this one. We are talking about two-subject structure, same subject plus infinitive, and events, all the habitual, past and future. So the concept of events still works as usual. The only difference is that here, just like in part 1 and 2 of our videos, we need to be conscious of whether we are talking about two subjects doing two actions versus one subject doing two actions. First, let's look at the habitual event. I will give you two pairs for contrast. Después de desayunar, yo leo el periódico. And después de que tú desayunas, yo leo el periódico. Look at these sentences closely. Both describe something that happens normally, so we are not talking about subjunctive. But what exactly is the difference then? In the first sentence, there's only one subject doing both, eating breakfast and reading the newspaper. In cases like that, just like we had discussed in our previous videos, we have to drop the conjunction que and use the infinitive. So we have después de desayunar. However, in the second sentence, we have two subjects, tú and yo, doing their own actions. In cases like this, if you want to say after, it has to be después de que, plus verb in the normal indicative form, in our case, desayunas. Again, no subjunctive needed because we are talking about a habitual event. Here's two more examples for you. Después de cenar, vemos una película. And después de que cenan los niños, vemos una película. Same thing, right? Now let's see what happens with the past events. What we have is después de hablar con el jefe, yo firmé el contrato. And después de que Marcus habló con el jefe, yo firmé el contrato. Even in the past, the idea remains the same. Since we're talking about completed events in the past, there's no need for subjunctive. We simply need to be conscious of how many subjects we have and how many actions they perform. That will decide whether we use después de plus infinitive or después de que plus indicative. Here is another set of examples in the past. Después de llegar a casa, me duché. And después de que tú llegaste, me duché. Not too bad, right? Now let's see what happens with future events. Here's where things get interesting. First we have same subject plus infinitive structure. Después de comer, saldré. Same structure as in previous videos. One person doing two things, no subjunctive needed, even if we are talking about a future event. Now look at this. Yo saldré después de que tú comas. So what can we observe here? We have two subject structure that describes an uncertain event in the future. In this case, we have to trigger subjunctive. Let's look at both of these sentences closely. It's important to understand that only después de que triggers subjunctive and only in the future. When we don't have a conjunction que, we have to use infinitive, and in this case we have to follow the logic from previous videos, regardless of which type of event we're talking about. Let me show you more examples of future events. Después de terminar, te llamo. This is one subject doing two actions. Even though we're describing some uncertain event in the future, here we have to use infinitive instead of triggering subjunctive. Now let's do the same for two subjects. Te llamo después de que termines. I will call you after you finish. A normal two-subject structure in the future, which requires us to use a subjunctive, since we don't know when exactly you're gonna finish. Quick heads up before we move on. You may sometimes see después de que triggering subjunctive even with one subject in a future sentence, like this. Te llamo después de que termine. You see, even though here we have the same one subject doing two actions, we still somehow triggered subjunctive. It's not wrong. The translation doesn't change, so you don't need to worry about it right now. Just don't let it overwhelm you if or when you see it. For now, when you have a future event with only one subject performing two actions, stick with the después de plus infinitive. Test number 5. Only one sentence for you. I will leave after you eat. You have two tasks to do. First, you need to decide whether you should use después de or después de que. Second, if you choose después de que, you'll have to also decide whether the verb comer should be conjugated in normal indicative or subjunctive form. As always, take your time. Time skip. Let's break it down. We've got two subjects, yo and tú, doing two different actions. That means we cannot use infinitive, so después de plus infinitive structure is out of the picture. We need the full después de que, that's number one. And since we're describing a future event, we have to also trigger subjunctive. That gives us yo saldré después de que tú comas. Good job. Let's continue to the next trigger as I'm getting fucking tired. Chapter 6. Antes de que. Now let's move to the last trigger for today, and that is antes de que, which means before. This one is easy because it always triggers subjunctive. The reason is simple. We are describing things, ideas, and events before they happen. This shows uncertainty and requires us to use subjunctive, regardless of which type of event we're talking about. Other than that, it works the same way as después de que, meaning that if we have one subject doing two actions, we will have to use antes de plus infinitive. And the two people doing two actions will use antes de que plus subjunctive. Let's begin with a habitual event. We can say Marcos siempre come antes de salir. We are describing a routine. Marcos does both eating and leaving. That's why we use antes de plus infinitive. We don't need subjunctive here. Now look at this. Marcos siempre come antes de que tú llegues. Same habitual routine here, except we have to trigger subjunctive. We have two subjects doing two actions. I know, usually we don't trigger subjunctive when we talk about habitual routines, but in case of antes de que, by definition, we always talk about something that hasn't happened yet, or rather before something happened, regardless of whether we are talking about the present, past, or future. Now let's look at the future event. Quiero terminar esto antes de salir. Nothing crazy here. If it's not antes de que, we don't even think of using subjunctive. Unlike this, quiero terminar esto antes de que salgas. Again, we don't know when you're going to leave, so that uncertainty triggers subjunctive. I hope it makes sense. What about the past event, you ask? Let me show you one example and I will explain why you shouldn't worry about it today. Quería terminar esto antes de que salieras. There's a reason why I put past event at the end this time, and it's because up until now in our videos we were talking only about present subjunctive. Unfortunately, there's also something that is called imperfect subjunctive, or you can also say past subjunctive for simplicity. Just like we use present subjunctive to describe uncertainty in the present and future, imperfect subjunctive is used to describe uncertainty in the past. This beast requires learning another set of conjugations and has its own exceptions, which I am planning to discuss in depth after showing you all the necessary triggers, as most of these triggers can be used in both present and past subjunctive verb forms. If I gave you all this information today or in the previous 2 videos, you would lose your brains. The sentence you see on the screen right now describes the past event which was not completed. Maybe it was completed later, but we don't know at this moment when we tell the story. Salieras is the imperfect subjunctive form of the verb salir. In the present subjunctive form, it will be salgas. I'll promise we will come back to it and discuss it in great detail, but for now, please don't get overwhelmed by this. For now, just remember that antes de que always triggers subjunctive. That's what makes it different from después de que. Last test for today, my friends. Which sentence is correct? Marcos come antes de salir? Or Marcos come antes de que John salga? 3, 2, 1. Alright. Both sentences are actually correct this time. They just mean different things, and that's the whole point. In the sentence number 1, Marcos is doing both things. He eats and he leaves. Same person, 2 actions. That means we drop que and use the infinitive, so we have antes de salir. In the sentence number 2, Marcos eats before John leaves. 2 subjects, 2 actions, so we have to keep que and trigger subjunctive. Therefore we have antes de que salga. Remember, the idea is that if we have antes de que, then whoever is leaving is not Marcos. But if it's just antes de without que, then Marcos is the one leaving, since he's the only subject. Great work. I know it was a lot. So let's try to recap everything and then I'll tell you how proud of you I am. The previous videos number 1 and 2 were all about weirdo triggers, expressing your feelings about other people's actions, such as wishes, emotions and doubts. That was 85% of subjunctive usage. Today we went beyond weirdo. We talked about the time-based triggers, that is, expressing uncertainty about when things happen. This is the other 15%. Well, part of it at least. The main thing that you need to burn into your brain today is the concept of an event. Number 1, when we talk about habitual or past events, it means we know that something happens on a regular basis or it already happened. Here we use normal indicative tense, can be present, can be past. Number 2, however, when we talk about a future event, we don't always know if or when it will happen. Here, since we are describing uncertainty, in most cases we will need to use subjunctive. Now let's quickly go over all 6 triggers that we've learned today. In chapter 1 we talked about cuando. You can see all examples on the screen. Just like we learned, future means uncertainty, means subjunctive. In chapter 2 we talked about hasta que. You can see more examples on the screen right now as well. Same idea here was applied, only future triggers subjunctive. In chapter 3 we learned about en cuanto and tan pronto como, both of which mean as soon as. Again, same idea. As soon as something happens at some moment in the future, subjunctive will be triggered. Chapter 4 was a bit trickier because the conjunction mientras can have 3 translations. Translation number 1, while, which happens during the simultaneous actions. Here we have to follow the master rule. Only future event triggers subjunctive. Translation number 2, as long as. This is a condition. In this case, mientras always triggers subjunctive. Translation number 3, whereas. This is a contrast. Here we're just showing the contrast between 2 facts. Since there's no uncertainty here, therefore there's never a need to use subjunctive. Also remember that mientras is used with que here, so it's mientras que. In chapter 5 we talked about después de que. Here we brought back 2 familiar concepts from the previous videos. Number 1, one subject doing 2 actions. In this case we have to use después de plus infinitive. No subjunctive needed. Number 2, two subjects doing two actions. In this case, we can trigger subjunctive, but only in a future event, and it has to have the structure of two subjects doing two actions. Lastly, in chapter 6, we played with the antes de que. It has the same one-two subject situation as después de que, but with extra twist. Number 1, one subject doing two actions. Here we have to use antes de plus infinitive, same as después de. Number 2, two subjects doing two actions. The extra twist here is that antes de que always triggers subjunctive, even for habitual events. That is because, by definition, we're describing something before it happens. There is always uncertainty there. I did not include past event here because it triggers a different type of beast called imperfect subjunctive. That's a story for another day. Whew, this was a lot, I know. In this video we started the advanced section of the Spanish subjunctive. Originally all advanced triggers were supposed to be a part of this one single video, but covering just time-based triggers took a length of the entire video. That's why there will be more videos that I originally planned. For now, just make sure you understand the concept of an event and which events trigger subjunctive. This is hard, and you should accept the fact that it will take you a while to properly master it. Not everyone wants to learn this, and I'm sure as hell not a lot of people wants to teach that, and now I understand why. Nevertheless, subjunctive is a very important part of a Spanish language, and I'm very proud and grateful for you to take this leap of faith with me. Please don't forget about the additional materials in the video description, such as PDF and a quiz, so that you can get some additional practice wherever you are. The previous video can be found right here, and in the next video we're gonna continue learning advanced triggers, specifically conditional triggers like aunque, a menos que, and como si. Basically all those if or unless situations. But for now, thank you for watching and see you soon.